The mahogany doors of Whitmore Associates law firm had never looked more imposing. I stood in the hallway, watching my husband's family file into the conference room for the reading of Grandma Eleanor's will. My black dress was perfectly pressed, my hair pulled back in a respectful bun, yet none of that mattered to the human barricade blocking my path. "This is family only," my brother-in-law Richard announced, his bulky frame filling the doorway. Behind him, I could see the rest of the Pemberton clan already settling into leather chairs around the polished table. "I am family," I said quietly. "I've been married to James for 7 years. Richard's smile was cold. "Legal family, Meredith, blood family, you understand." Oh, I understood. I understood perfectly, just as I had understood every slight, every excluded invitation, every forgotten family photo over the years. The middle-class teacher who'd married their precious James was never quite good enough for the Pembertons and their textile empire. "Of course," I said, taking a step back, "I'll wait outside." "Actually," Richard's wife Patricia called out from inside, not bothering to lower her voice, "why don't you just go home? This could take hours. And really, it's not like Mother Pemberton would have left anything to, well, you know, to the help." That's what she'd almost said, because that's how they saw me, the hired help who'd somehow tricked their brother into marriage. James didn't even look up from his phone to defend me, he never did. "I'll be in the cafe downstairs," I said, maintaining my composure. "James, text me when you're done." As I walked away, I heard Patricia whisper, "Thank God." Can you imagine? She probably expected something just for playing nurse these last few months. Playing nurse, that's what they called my daily visits to Grandma Eleanor during her final battle with cancer. While they conducted business and counted money, I'd spent every afternoon at her bedside, reading her favorite books, bringing her peppermint tea, listening to stories about the company she'd built from nothing after Grandpa died. The cafe was nearly empty at 10 in the morning. I ordered a black coffee and settled into a corner booth, pulling out my phone. No messages yet, but I didn't expect any, not from James, and certainly not from Attorney Whitmore, who'd been very careful to follow Grandma Eleanor's specific instructions. I smiled into my coffee, remembering our conversation from 3 months ago. "They don't appreciate you," Eleanor had said, her voice weak but her gray eyes sharp as ever. "My own children, my grandchildren, they see $signs when they look at me, but you, dear one, you see an old woman who needs a friend." "I see a remarkable woman who built an empire," I'd corrected gently, "and who makes the best stories about the old days." She'd laughed, then coughed, then grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "The will reading is going to be interesting." "Eleanor, I don't care about." "I know you don't. That's exactly why I did what I did." She'd winked then, looking more like a mischievous girl than a dying matriarch. "Harold Whitmore has all the paperwork, the real paperwork, not the will they'll be reading upstairs." I'd tried to ask more, but she'd drifted off to sleep, still holding my hand. Now, sitting in the cafe, I watched the clock. 10:15, 10:30, 10:45. The family was probably going through the will line by line, calculating their percentages, dividing up Eleanor's fortune like hungry wolves. At 11:07, my phone buzzed. Not James, Attorney Whitmore. "Mrs. Pemberton, could you please return to the conference room? There's been a development." The elevator ride felt longer this time. When the doors opened, I could hear the shouting from down the hall. "This is fraud," Richard's voice boomed. "She manipulated a dying woman." "I assure you, everything is completely legal," Harold Whitmore's calm voice replied. I walked in to find chaos. Patricia was crying into a handkerchief. Richard was red-faced and standing. James sat frozen, staring at a document in his hands. Other family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, were all talking at once. "Ah, Mrs. Pemberton," Harold Whitmore stood as I entered. "Please, have a seat." "She doesn't belong here," Patricia shrieked. "Actually," Harold said, adjusting his glasses, "she's the only one who needs to be here." The room fell silent. "What?" James finally looked at me, confusion replacing his usual indifference. Harold cleared his throat. "As I was explaining, the will we just read, leaving the estate divided among the family members, was indeed Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton's official last will and testament. However, it pertains only to her personal assets. The company, Pemberton Textiles, was not hers to give." "Of course it was." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "She owned everything." "She owned 49%, Harold corrected. "The other 51% has been held in a trust for the past 5 years. A trust that, as of Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton's death, Transfers full ownership to its beneficiary. What trust? James demanded. What beneficiary? Harold looked at me. The Eleanor Rose Trust, named after Mrs. Pemberton's mother. The beneficiary is Meredith and Pemberton. The silence was deafening. That's impossible, Patricia whispered. Quite possible, and completely legal, Harold said. He pulled out a thick folder. 5 years ago, Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton restructured the company ownership. She maintained 49% voting rights during her lifetime, while placing 51% in an irrevocable trust. Upon her death, the trust transfers to Mrs. Meredith Pemberton, along with this letter. He handed me an envelope, Eleanor's handwriting, shaky but clear, for my true daughter. She wasn't of sound mind, Richard said quickly. We'll contest. The trust was established 5 years ago, Harold interrupted, long before any illness. I have documentation from 3 independent physicians confirming Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton's mental capacity at the time. Additionally, the board of directors was informed and approved the restructuring. The board knew? James turned to his brother accusingly. Richard's face went from red to white. There were so many documents. You knew, Patricia breathed. You knew and you didn't tell us? I didn't know it was her. Richard pointed at me. The trust documents just listed trust. I thought it was some tax shelter. I opened Eleanor's letter, my hand steady despite the chaos around me. My dearest Meredith. If you're reading this, then the cats are out of the bag, as they say. By now, my family is probably having fits. Let them. For 5 years, you've been the only one who visited me because you wanted to, not because you wanted something. You learned the business not to grab power, but because you genuinely cared about my stories. You treated me like a person, not a bank account. Remember when you asked why I still went to the office every day? I told you it was because the company was my life. That was only half true. I went because I was documenting everything, every decision, every meeting, every detail you'd need to know. It's all in the office safe. Harold has the combination. The family business needs someone who understands that it's about more than money. It's about the 1,200 people we employ. It's about the communities we serve. It's about the legacy of hard work and integrity. You're the only one who gets that. Give them hell, dear one. All my love. Eleanor. We'll sue, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. On what grounds? I asked, finally speaking. That Eleanor chose to leave her company to someone who actually cared about it? You manipulated her. I brought her tea. I read her Jane Austen. I listened to her stories about building this company when women weren't supposed to run businesses. I stood, looking each of them in the eye. I treated her like family, which is more than any of you did. You shut us out, Patricia accused, always hovering, always there. I never stopped anyone from visiting. I said simply, you stopped yourselves. When was the last time any of you went to see her without wanting something? When did you ever just talk to her? James finally found his voice. Meredith, surely we can discuss. We'll discuss it at the board meeting, I said. Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. You can't just waltz in and take over, Richard blustered. Actually, I can. I'm the majority shareholder. I turned to Harold. I assume all the paperwork is in order? Perfectly in order, he confirmed. The transfer is effective immediately. This isn't over, Richard threatened. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. Pemberton Textiles is about to remember what it stands for. Eleanor built this company on fair wages, quality products, and treating employees like family. We're going back to that. That's not how business works anymore, Patricia sneered. Then we'll change how business works. I gathered my purse and Eleanor's letter. Oh, and Richard? That offshore account you've been skimming from? The one you thought Eleanor didn't know about? I have all the documentation. You have 2 choices, resign quietly and pay back what you stole, or I press charges. You have until Monday to decide. His face went gray. How did you? Eleanor knew everything, and she taught me well. I looked at my husband, who seemed to be seeing me for the first time in years. James, I'll be at the Riverside Hotel. Have my things sent over. Meredith, wait. But I was already walking out, leaving them to their chaos. In the elevator, I allowed myself one small smile. Eleanor always did love a good plot twist. The next few days were a whirlwind. Lawyers, accountants, and advisory meetings filled my schedule. The employees, it turned out, were thrilled. They'd watched the family strip away benefits and cut corners for years, all while Eleanor grew too weak to fight them. Richard resigned and agreed to a repayment plan. Patricia tried to rally the family against me but found no support once they realized I controlled their dividends. James sent flowers and apologies, but I wasn't interested in his sudden affection. On Monday morning, I walked into Pemberton Textiles as the owner. The same security guard who'd always been kind to me during my visits to Eleanor now opened the door with a huge grin. "Mrs. Pemberton, we heard the news. Welcome." "Thank you, George. How's your daughter? Still at nursing school?" His eyes widened. "You remembered. Eleanor taught me that the most important assets in any company are the people." The board meeting was tense but brief. With 51% ownership, my decisions were final. We reinstated the pension plan Richard had gutted. We approved hiring for the 100 positions they'd streamlined. We increased the starting wage to match inflation. "This is financial suicide," one board member protested. Pemberton Textiles had its best years when employees were treated well, I countered. Happy workers make quality products. Quality products build reputation. Reputation builds profit. Eleanor understood that. Her children forgot it. After the meeting, I took the elevator to the top floor, Eleanor's office. My office now. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, including the photo on her desk, not of her family, but of her and me at last year's company picnic, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember. I sank into her chair and opened the safe with the combination Harold had given me. Inside were dozens of notebooks, all in Eleanor's handwriting, business strategies, employee histories, customer relationships, everything I'd need to run the company she'd loved. The last notebook was different. On the cover, "For Meredith, who saw me when I was invisible." Inside, page after page of personal messages, memories of our afternoon talks, and business advice mixed with life wisdom. The final entry, dated just a week before she died. "They think power comes from taking. You know it comes from giving. They think strength means stepping on others. You know it means lifting them up. Take care of my company, dear one, but more importantly, take care of my people. The family I chose is so much more precious than the family I was given." I closed the notebook and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, the Pembertons were probably still raging about the unfairness of it all. Let them. They'd had every opportunity to be the family Eleanor needed, and they'd chosen greed over grace. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. George, the security guard, peeked in. "Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Pemberton, but there's a group of employees in the lobby. They want to thank you for the pension announcement." "Send them up," I said. "And George, from now on, this office has an open-door policy." Eleanor would have wanted it that way. As the elevator filled with the people whose lives I now had the power to impact, I thought about family. The Pembertons thought blood made you family, but Eleanor knew better. Family was the people who showed up when showing up was all they could offer. Family was choosing love over leverage, compassion over competition. And sometimes, family was an old woman and a young woman, sharing tea and stories, building a bond stronger than any will or legal document. The employees flooded in, their faces bright with hope I hadn't seen in years. As I shook hands and accepted thanks, I made a silent promise to Eleanor I would take care of her true family, all 1,200 of them. The Pembertons could keep their 49%. I had everything that really mattered: the majority vote, the employees' trust, and the knowledge that Eleanor's legacy would live on not in her blood relatives who'd forgotten her worth, but in every worker who'd remember her compassion. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't money or property. Sometimes it's the chance to prove that kindness and competence can coexist, that power can be used to lift rather than crush. And sometimes, just sometimes, the outsider looking in was actually the insider all along.